Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 4 o'clock. The quorum is present. Ms. Weld will not be joining us today. I just want you all to know that this meeting is being audio and visually recorded. Are there any comments from the public on any issue, any item that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go on to the review of November 17th. I was not at that meeting, therefore I cannot comment. Are there any additions, corrections?
I just have one question. Steve, you mentioned something about when we turned down, where is it? There was something they said, hold on, I'll find it here. They wondered why it was even in the...
5 up top, why the variance request.
Right, it said, Shampoo asked why the waiver criteria are still in the regulations, and Steve suggested they should be removed. Have they been removed?
Well,
are they going to be removed?
First of all, I don't think they can be removed privately.
No, we would have
We would have to open a...
We'd have to open a hole.
Okay, I just had that question.
So they're still there.
I think you mentioned that too. Yeah,
Right, and I think you just have to think that through, because
Okay.
I hear there's logic to the question if we're going to say no every time, but
Right.
there may be a time where we don't.
Okay,
And so
that's fine.
It may be very unusual, but I don't think you take it out just...
Yep, that's perfect, okay.
Without thinking it through. So with that, I don't have any...
You okay?
I'm all set.
Any other objections? So by unanimous consent of the 3 people other than myself, those minutes are approved for November 17th. Now, we did have an error in our October 11th meeting where we granted a 10-year extension for people with IA systems if they were going to be sewered. And what we said, I'm quite sure, was it would be 10 years from the time of the septic approval. And these say sewer.
Yeah.
So,
But what happens if there is no sewer after 10 years? His permit's no good for the IA system?
well, we could remember what we said. We would address that again
When it came up?
when it came up, depending upon the time of the actual sewer. I mean, my recommendation would be to leave it as we said, unless there's...
We'll just be... I thought the idea, I hope I'm on the right case here, was that the waiver was about required hookups.
Yes.
So that if there was no sewer to hook up to, it's sort of moot.
It is sort of
It
moved.
doesn't hurt anything or benefit anything.
Right.
So,
I would leave it as it is,
Yeah.
and then if miraculously a sewers appear 5 years from now, or 1 year from now, or 10 years from now, who's ever here can make that adjustment accordingly. I
Yeah.
just think the minutes need to reflect what we actually said.
Yeah,
language is good.
the minutes merely said that it was for connection to, since the sewer permit, what we meant was
Was the
septic permit.
Septic permit.
And the septic permit, yes.
So would you please correct those?
We need to vote
I
on
need
it.
a motion to do accept or approve the amended.
Could we read the language? Because I had thought you might want to extend the language even more, but it may not be necessary. Roberto?
Yes. So the suggested language was that it should say, motion to issue an island-wide policy for a variance of 10 years from the time of the septic permit is issued. And then there was a suggestion by Mr. Atherton to say that motion to issue an island-wide policy for a variance of 10 years from the time the septic hookup is issued to be required to hook up to sewer if one runs in the street on which the lot is located.
I was just trying to
So
make
you-
sure the motion reflected what we were really talking about.
Yeah,
a
as
little
long as
more
the-
extensively.
Yeah, as long as the sewer is there and available.
As long as the sewer's there.
Anyway,
All right, so I need a motion to amend those minutes.
I'd make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the amendment as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye. Those minutes will be amended. Next item is Laurie Smith, request for temporary housing due to house fire.
Yes, so as almost everyone here knows, there was a fire on Thanksgiving, over the Thanksgiving break, that resulted in a family being displaced. They are requesting a temporary housing trailer to be placed on their property while the repairs are made. We have done this before. It is relatively standard practice. It's just as part of the housing code that would require that to be used as a residence until I see no objection in this.
Any questions for Roberto? Hearing none, do I have a motion that we will approve the request for temporary housing?
Motion to approve.
Any second? I hear a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Chairman says aye. Then the request for temporary housing at 21 Helens Lane, for the fire for 21 Helens Lane is approved. Okay, moving on. Next item. As you know, during the summer we talked about the proposal from MIT by Dr. Esvelt about this genetically engineered mice project. We expressed interest in it. Since that time, Martha's Vineyard has also expressed interest in it. So the two of us will be working on this. In July, we approved a management plan where, if you recall, there would be a steering committee chaired by Dr. Esvelt with representatives from scientists who have an interest in it, and also there'd be at least one representative from any community that had interest in it. It doesn't say any community that's approved this. As remember, there was quite a long approval process before we actually had genetically engineered mice on the island. In fact, the last step would actually, a town warrant would have to have the whole town vote on it. We're a long, long way from that. But he has made progress. He has raised a little bit of money. So the project is going forward. So at a time where I think it's appropriate that he has the proper input both from Nantucket and both from a scientific perspective. In your package, you'll find a CV of Dr. Emily Goldstein, who is right over there, if you have any questions for her. She's the new Natural Science Director at Mariah Mitchell. Just for the record, I want you all to know I'm on the board of Mariah Mitchell, but I see no conflict here because I actually have absolutely no financial gain to get from this. So if you have any, I would propose that she be our representative. She is a rodent biologist. She knows a lot of, she deals in squirrels, but she does know rodents. And she's also a field biologist, and this will take a lot of field work at some point, and she understands genetics. So if you have any questions for Emily, she's there. In fact, Roberto thinks she knows somebody.
Just a quick question.
It's always nice to have connections.
Do you work with Jane Waterman from the university? Yeah, she was my advisor in undergraduate at University of Central Florida. She's awesome. That's really nice that you know that. That's really cool. I
Anyways,
was just curious.
any questions for myself or Emily? Or
Sounds like a great find.
I think it's probably the best person we have on the island right now for this, for this particular project. So may I hear a motion that we appoint Emily?
Yeah, and she went to Wayland High School, right? That's the key to the whole deal, right there.
Yeah.
Great.
Motion to appoint.
A second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of Emily as our steering committee representative, the MIT Genetic Mice Project, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye. You're on. She's already talked to me about some ideas she has about making the project a little better. So, and the only thing we ask of you is come back every 6 months or so and, let us know what's going on. And as I said, this is an exciting project. As we all know, it's really the mice that are the problem more than the deer. But it will be a long, long time if this ever comes. But I think we have to try it. All right, thank you. All right, now the exciting parts. Request for loan monies, 11 Dukes Road.
Yep. So 11 Dukes Road is looking to connect to the sewer. They're asking for the betterment loan. We're looking to connect as many people to sewer as possible, so no objection here.
Any comments, questions?
No, it looks straightforward.
I hear a request for a betterment loan for 11 Dukes Road.
You want a motion to approve?
Yes. Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of betterment loan for 11 Dukes Road, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye. Loan's approved. Okay, now we have a whole series of variances on the agenda. 11, 12, and 13 have been tabled. So the first one is for 128 Hummet Pond Road.
Oh, I'll let Mr. Gasparo.
Mr. Gasparo, welcome.
Thank you. For the record, Arthur Gasparo. I'm before you tonight with a series of 3 applications, and I'll go through them one at a time. The first one you mentioned is 128 Hummock Pond Road. The applications are similar in that they...
You can go through them, but we're going to vote on them separately.
Exactly. I think I will. They're similar, but we should discuss. I will discuss them individually with you. Thank you. At 128 Hummock Pond Road, you've got a lot that's about 106,000 square feet in area. It's located within the Hummock Pond Watershed Protection District, and what we're asking for is local relief under Section 6407B, 6404B, with respect to the requirement that you have 10,000 square feet of lot area per bedroom. Title V and the Mass DEP IA approval letters allow for a loading rate of 6 bedrooms per acre versus the 4 bedrooms per acre that your regulations require. And in this case, we believe that the variance is justified to allow a loading rate that meets the DEP approval letter. We're not asking for, it's in complete compliance with Title V, that would allow the loading rate of essentially 660 gallons per day per 40,000 square feet. And a couple of reasons that we would say that this is justified, and you're going to provide an increased level of protection using an IA system over a conventional system. And I've laid it out in the letter in terms of pounds nitrogen, but I think to just sort of put it in straightforward terms, when you use the IA systems, there's been several studies that have been done. There's an EPA paper that's out. There's more recently some studies that have been done in Rhode Island. And, of course, there's the sampling data that you get as well in Barnstable County. And when you start to look at the reductions that exceed 50% in your total nitrogen within the waste flow, getting down below the 19 milligrams per liter, your total nitrogen contribution from a slightly larger system, a system that meets the 6 bedrooms per acre, is actually less than what you would get from 4 bedrooms conventional. And so for that reason, I would think it would be in the board's interest to approve the system that allows a property owner to essentially get what's allowed under the state. It gets you an alternative, the Nantucket and the board, an alternative system instead of a conventional system. And I think in all of these cases, something to be considered as someone that deals with septic systems all the time, is that when you have an alternative system, it's a highly managed system. It's a monitored system. There's operation and maintenance contracts. There's filters that are cleaned. There's an alarm panel, control panels. With a conventional system, it's just left. Nobody looks at them unless there's some catastrophic problem of a backup, or unless there's a transfer that requires an inspection, or if it happens to be in one of your districts that now require the inspections, and even that at 5 years. So you go from a conventional system that is, just left on its own to a system that actually has less nitrogen, though it has a couple extra bedrooms, and is operated and managed, that you get data on and is logged. So I think for all of those reasons, the request to allow the couple extra bedrooms, or whatever the number of bedrooms is, as long as it meets essentially the couple extra bedrooms per acre basis, is justified and truly serves a better environmental protection interest. So that's the I did include in all of these, tried to give you aerials and locus maps and distances so that you do have a sense of that these properties are not right on a water body. All of them are located, quite some distance. This particular one that we're discussing is, 2,700 feet from the pond, the opposite side of Hummock Pond Road. So again, you're not going to have any kind of, direct leaching.
Which side, is it this slide here?
Just for the board, do you want to have them present all three and then discuss it, or head one at a time? What's easier for you?
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, I think he's asking the
I
board.
think
I'll do whatever
why
you
don't we
want.
present them all? Because
Okay.
if it's got a similar type of discussion, if they're all going to go the same way.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a similar, and then actually the
We might go individual, Mr. Chairman. I would,
8 Pinkham Drive, there's similar,
Pinkham's not mine.
I know, but there
Oh.
is a similarity with one of yours. But we'll do yours three, and then the board will help me remember what you've done.
I do think, for maybe clarity of the minutes and approvals, that if you wouldn't mind,
Fine, go right ahead.
It might be best to just take them individually.
all.
So that's essentially the presentation on 128, and then I can probably give a little abbreviated on the next couple. But every property is different, and so I think that we should probably cover them individually.
So-
Roberto, what is-
Town water there, right? Are you-
The town, this property will be connected. It's currently on an on-site well, but it is slated to be connected to town water, and will be connected to town water.
I think we did something similar right across the street.
That's right. So that situation was slightly different in that had fallen under the variance relief is exactly the same, and the premise is exactly the same. The difference on that one was one of those situations of a previously issued permit, so it was a little bit different. But that one was a little closer to the pond. But in terms of loading rates, getting an alternative system, it is the same in very similar circumstance.
Okay.
Roberto, what's your feeling?
It looks like we're speaking to one at a time.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Definitely we're
That's
speaking-
actually, I'm sorry, that's easier for me.
Yeah, it's best to take them one at a time.
Yeah, 'cause
considering
otherwise I
different
get-
watersheds. And
I get
stuff.
very confused.
It's one of those things that we have done this before. We have accepted it before. Either way, we still have to track it. We still have to enforce regulations, rules, regulations, IA systems, whole 9 yards. So what it comes down to is the level of environmental protection that you want to enforce. It is in the watershed, but we have done something like this before. It adds more to our tracking needs, but it's still an IA system that needs to be tracked anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be tracked anyways.
Yeah, how big is the
I'm
lot?
not-
106,000 square feet.
So
I think Art also has
conventional
comments on it.
could have
Um,
10.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, a conventional would have a 9-bedroom
Nine.
system, and then the IA would be a 15.
And the net benefit is,
The net benefit that I laid out was 0.322 pounds of nitrogen per day from a 9-bedroom compared to 0.1928 pounds from a 15 with the reduction in the treatment.
so the net benefit is pretty big.
It's significant.
So
Go ahead.
Well, let's sort of take this down, because this sounds like the old bonus business. Similar.
Yep.
Very similar.
So what happens on a 1 acre lot? And we have the same discussion. Are we switching? I just want to make sure we sort of go through a number of possibilities here of examples, because once we start going by these numbers, I think we're going to get locked in here pretty quickly.
Well, then
And-
yes.
And we ought to know what we're up to.
Yeah, typically on, let's say you're on a 1 acre lot, straight Title V, let's say Tom Nevers, 1 acre lot, IA system, you'd be allowed to have 6 bedrooms on it. It's 1 extra bedroom per 20,000 square feet.
For an
is
IA,
the
you mean?
quick, yeah, for an IA, that's the quick and dirty mathematics.
Now, but that's the bedroom mathematics. Is that the same? What's the math on the nitrogen calculations? Because those are I think that the representation here isn't the bedrooms. The representation is the nitrogen calculation. And I think the staff has to certify to us in effect, or somebody does, not Arthur, that those calculations are correct.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm
I
not
can see
saying
that,
I don't
yeah.
trust
Fair enough.
Arthur, but it's like, it's Hoyfogle or whoever that guy is in, somebody's saying these numbers are right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, George Hoyfeld.
So I have a question. Is this one lot?
Number 128 is a single lot.
It's
Yeah,
going to be
single
one
lot.
lot.
It's one property, yes.
could it be
Yeah.
subdivided?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know for sure. I don't think it has I don't think it would have adequate area in that zoning district.
Yeah,
but
I
I would
just-
So
Yeah,
you're going to
it's
put in 15 bedroom septic system?
up to. This would be an approval for if they decided to do something between 9 and 15.
Yeah, it's like a small
I'm trying to
hotel.
come in-
But not, this isn't to look down the road at a subdivision.
It's not.
No.
It's not. It's to allow them to have some extra bedrooms above a conventional, so it only makes sense to come in and say, this is what it would essentially be up to under the Title V approval letter. And if I could just address the previous comment, I did look at a couple of different sources of information, because I wanted to make sure as well that what I'm representing is based on these reductions. And so, if you think about it in terms of strictly a percentage reduction that you get out of these systems, you're measuring the total nitrogen content going in, and you're measuring the total nitrogen content coming out. And the studies are pretty much all over 50%. The published document that I've referenced is at 64%. That was the EPA document. I also found a more recent study. I considered including it with this, but I didn't want to overly complicate. But there's a Rhode Island study. There's a lot of wastewater work that's been going on there, and I could provide that paper to the staff of the board if you'd like. But essentially confirming those kind of reductions, and that's further confirmed through the Barnstable County. So as long as you're getting reductions that exceed 50% in your total nitrogen, so conventional versus an IA that cuts it in half.
I'd like to see more than 50%. I mean,
Well,
in
that's-
some ways it's intriguing, this concept of using these calculations, because I love math. And it might be some way better than actually measuring bedrooms in square feet.
Yeah.
However, that's not what we do. That's not what the statute says, and we have no real precedent for it. So that's why I'm a little uneasy.
Yeah, there's
Well,
that.
I'd like the idea. I'm uneasy about it.
There,
Let's take another example, and then I'll come right back to you.
No
But let me
worries.
so let's say the numbers you gave us, I like to be extreme to make the point, were 3,222, and you gave us 3,221. Do you know what I mean? It's better.
I'm just
I'm
getting
not.
my
I'm
thought.
not asking you to comment. I'm talking to us, because you're going to, maybe the different system has a different set of numbers, and so on and so forth. So, is it the 50% reduction that's attracting us? Is it just like a nitrogen bank, and it's one less ounce going in that's attracting us? What is attracting us, and how are we going to deal with a different set of numbers in the future?
And the other thing is, we don't want to get back in the corner just because the net benefit is what it is less does that mean we're automatically going to give more bedrooms every time someone comes up with a system like this?
Jim, exactly. And the next way to say the same thing I just said here was to say, let's say this person, has enough room in these numbers to have a 27-bedroom house. And,
Right.
and his number instead of 322 is, compared to 2785.
You still need the 10,000 square feet per bedroom. I mean, that's what
Well,
you,
but that's for 5 bedrooms, or whatever the numbers were.
But,
Whatever the size you can-
basically, he's got 10 bedrooms. He's got enough land for 10 bedrooms.
9.
9.
9.
And we're letting him have 15 because we get a net profit. We get less in the net. You know what I'm saying? The numbers when we give him 15 are good for the nutrient. But does that mean every time someone comes here, and they have enough for 4 bedrooms,
Well,
they
their number's
want
only
7 because
bigger.
it'll give the net benefit is for us?
it's only bigger because of the size of the lot.
Right.
It's going to be different on on a tiny lot.
Well, that's what I wanted to help understand,
yeah.
but because the concept, Steve, of dealing with the numbers as the approval mechanism ought to be transferable from a 100,000-foot lot to a 36,000-foot lot, or is it?
I think I could address
I mean,
this.
it is with what the system is said to reduce, to whatever,
Yeah,
whether it's a biogas, septic
if-
deck,
I'd have to
microfast.
really think about that.
Mi-
Because you've got square footage, there's a lot of factors here, and again, in some ways, this is still theoretical in my mind.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think I can help address this in the way that the check, if you will, is that you still have to meet the approval letter from Title V. So it can't just be any reduction, right? We're meeting the loading rate of 660 per 40,000. It can't just be some then arbitrary number that says, oh, it's going to be 770 just because that per acre, just because it's a little bit better. In other words, and I believe that's why the Mass DEP set the numbers that they did for the approvals, and that's why you're allowed 660 per 40,000 and not 880. Because the reduction, they want you to get a net bet. They are in the same business as you are of environmental protection. And they want a system that is going to allow a bonus that's going to incentivize somebody to put this type of a system in. And then you end up with a benefit. And that's why that number is set at the 660. You still need to meet that area in order to then come to you. Now, if somebody came to you and asked, as an example, to say, well, this is slightly better, can we have this variance? Well, you're also going to be in a situation of having to go to Mass DEP and ask for a variance from, I think it's 15 to 14 for the nitrogen loading,
Right.
and I can't even imagine that you would get that without getting it into an aggregation plan. So I think that's the check that keeps it from getting out of hand. And again, I do think that the underlying, premise here is, yes, if someone comes in with whatever size lot and asks for the bedrooms, if ultimately there's significantly less nitrogen and a managed system, filters that are cleaned, systems that are watched, nitrogen that's reduced, you're going to get an owner. And again, in these other zones, right, it's one thing with Nantucket where now you've mandated Nantucket Harbor Watershed District, the IA system. These other districts, and in the wellhead, or in this particular instance, you're not going to get an IA system. You're going to get a conventional system.
Right, I just wanted to make
With
sure
more
I understood
nitrogen.
it. So if you weren't here doing this and the guy didn't want more bedrooms or whatever, you could come in, you'd have
be
a
conventional 9.
system.
9
You get
bedrooms.
9 bedrooms, that's just automatic.
And it'd be
Unless
conventional.
we change our approach because we're
To match
in a
Nantucket.
harbor, in a Hummock Pond watershed.
That's correct.
Which maybe we should do, but we haven't done that yet.
That's right.
What did we do across the street here?
Across the street, it was the situation. It was a very similar situation, but the difference here was that there was already a permit issued, previously issued.
I remember
permit.
that. Okay.
I got a simple question. Let's say this is a half-acre lot, and they're allowed 2 bedrooms. And the guy comes in and he says, I'm gonna put an IA system in, And if you give me 4 bedrooms, you get a net benefit. Are we going to give him 4 bedrooms?
We gave the half-acre lots in Fisher's Landing.
I know, that's what I'm
4
saying. So,
bedrooms.
so then we're going to put ourselves in a position that 2 bedrooms
I mean,
doesn't
that's
mean
being
2 bedrooms.
consistent. You'd have to, to me, I'd have to say yes. I'm going to allow you to have those 4 bedrooms with the IA system.
Right, but the Fisher's Landing had a little bit different because it was a bigger area they were trying to play off of and so forth. But I hear you.
Yeah, right.
That's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this, almost like have a grid. I mean, you're all quicker on the relationship between the half acre and the minimums and the 2 standards you're referring
We're
to.
not all that quicker.
And I just would find it helpful to maybe, I'm not sure how critical your approval is today versus next week.
No.
To work out a grid, Roberto, because we have our standard, but as Arthur says, there's the state standard, so there is a enforced differential of a certain percentage. That may change, for all I know, by lot size. I just think we ought to understand
Lot
that.
size, soil size, I mean, there's a lot, there's so many
And
different
the other
variables.
thing is, you can't say 1 bedroom every 10,000 square feet, because that's not true. I mean, 10,000 square feet, you should have 1 bedroom. 20,000, you should have 2. 30,000, you have 3. But that goes out the window if you're talking about an IA system. And is that what we want?
Right, that's,
So-
I think
so-
we need to think about it.
First of all, I always compliment you on your presentation and your paperwork. It's always,
Thank you, Mr.
it's
Chairman.
always excellent, and it's very easy to follow. Am I hearing kind of a consensus we want to think about this? I mean, I'm concerned about going into really ground we really haven't done before.
Well, that's why I'd like to ask Roberto to work up, whether it's a charter, a grid, or sort of a policy, because, it's like Steve said, we did it over here. And then, it's almost like the variance becomes the norm.
Well,
And
that's,
so they're not variance
it's always been
requests
my,
anymore.
the last 2 years is trying to be consistent, and it's getting extremely
Well,
difficult.
the only difference in this is that he's got a bigger lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you saw what was going to be proposed on Surfside 106 Surfside Road. I mean, if they
Right.
couldn't get on the sewer, that's would have on 2 acres of land.
Before
that's
we
coming
make
up
a
here.
decision, will another month make a big difference to you?
I'm sure the owners would like to know. We don't want to walk out of here, obviously, with a denial. I'm not trying. The board is going to act as the board, feels. I would just say, and I know I'm here as the applicant's representative, but I do believe that this makes a lot of sense to have the IA system. And yeah, I believe it should be the norm that says if you have one of these systems that reduces the nitrogen greater than a conventional system, it's a much better system. The IA system compared to a conventional system, it's the latest and greatest versus what's been happening for 100 plus years.
We've done a lot to encourage people to have them.
And here you have folks that are coming in voluntarily. Otherwise, you're going to have a conventional system. And
I
so,
don't think we're disagreeing with that, but
No,
I think
but
we're trying to
that's-
understand the implications.
and I think the
mean, we could do it
implication-
and ask Roberto to do all this work and come back next time or whatever. In the meantime, if someone's approved in the meantime, that's life. I don't know what
The
else
only
to do.
thing is, I don't want the variances to become the norm.
No, I don't either.
Well, and the other thing is, if once you give it to somebody, you better be ready to give it to everybody.
Well, that's why, if I was to vote today, I would probably.
I would vote no.
I would vote no.
we'll certainly request a continuance.
But I
don't
have
wanna
to hear
but-
the other 2 colleagues here.
But I would also ask, I guess, the direction, what you work out for the director to prepare, and I'd be happy to have conversations if I could in any way help with that. I'd be happy to help you get to a comfort level that is where I'm at with it in terms of I think it's what's good for Nantucket. Not only, yes, my clients want this, but I do believe that having one of these systems that meets the 1 bedroom per 6,667 square feet, that's what the math comes out to instead, is, with the latest and greatest technology is worth it.
Richard has a comment, if you'd introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll go on to a resolution.
Excuse me, Richard Wright, private citizen. There's been some talk here about comparing our requirements regarding the state requirements for this sort of issue. When Regulation 64 was enacted by the Board of Health at that point, one of the things taken into consideration was soil type. DEP's regulation is based on the soil triangle as explained within Title V. It encompasses every form of soil and compaction from clay to sand. So it's a very generic number as far as the state is concerned. One of the reasons we enacted it, Regulation 64, was a concern that we are certainly more strict in 64 than the state is. Our concern is that soil conditions throughout a majority of this island are essentially sand, and we get a less filtration concept here, a greater nutrification perhaps, or a less denitrification of the groundwater coming from a septic system. So we looked at the soil conditions because, again, we are mostly sand, and the state had to use a very generic soil condition. It's right in the middle of the triangle in Title V, but that describes all the soils, and yet we are in the lower corner that basically describes sand.
So hence, I mean, that's why we do soil tests.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, let's resolve.
Soil's different all over the island.
Yes, but a majority of the island is sand. Majority thereof.
There's two of us who here will vote no if there's a motion made.
Well, that'll be a tie. And
It'll be a
pass
tie.
anyway, so.
It'll be a tie anyway, so I think what we should do, give this one more month. But I'll be honest with you, I'm very skeptical about going in the new directions, because then we have to go back and see what we've done in the past to people. I think it's going to be a mess.
But I think we're going to have to go through it. It seems, in other words, a little bit. I hear you, but people are going to keep coming at us, I think, because the bedrooms are important to them in the end, and they're willing to upgrade the system for bedrooms, so they're not going to just stop. And it may turn out that, as we understand it better, it is an improvement. And so that's why I want to keep working on it. And whoever Roberto works with in the community ought to, it's almost like having a quick little committee of 6 folks, and let's.
But it's
talk
got to be
about it.
really fascinating, and I want to see it at least a week before, because if there's numbers and math, I need to go through
there's
it
going to be
myself.
some math involved. Just
Again,
also for the
I mean,
record-
we could make a motion, but if it's going to be a tie, then we might as well go on.
And also for the record about the 64% reduction, I have seen that EPA report, and the number is correct. Septic Tech was rated as 64% general reduction. I think it would also went that the Advantex also has like an higher number. It breaks them all down. So those numbers are correct. But I can definitely do some math on these
so
two.
We'd have, if people could choose from 6 systems, we'd have to know the number for each of those systems to keep the
and there is
quality.
there is a report.
All right. All right. Seeing as how it's a tie and there'd be no resolution, we'll ask you to go back and go through those numbers and maybe make some grids. But we're not going to go beyond next. And actually, next time maybe we'll have 5, and we could actually.
Right, so it'll be decided one way or
We
the
can
other.
decide it one way or the other.
Yes, sir.
So please, everybody come next time. I don't like ties. It's like the Supreme Court today. Nothing gets done.
What is it? Yeah, we got 8 guys down there now, right? Or gals and guys.
Yeah, but they never, okay.
Yeah.
Your next one is Two Sheeps Common.
So Two Sheeps Common is similar in that the application is for, you have a 27,000 square foot lot, and the application is for a 4-bedroom IA system. The difference on this particular one is that this entire this subdivision was part of a cluster subdivision. However, there wasn't the formal nitrogen aggregation plan done. There was a.
Have we had properties in this area before?
I
Why
don't
does
think
this
in
sound
this
familiar?
particular subdivision.
On
I
the
think.
opposite end.
Moore's End. So
it's
Moore's
part of
End,
all the property.
Moore's End Lane and Sheep
Yeah, okay,
Commons
okay.
Lane are
Go on.
part of the same cluster subdivision that set aside, I think it was 37 acres of open space. Now, in this particular subdivision, I mean, this road on it comes in off of Milestone Road, there was, on this exact lot in 2001, a conventional 4-bedroom system permitted and a permit issued. That system wasn't installed and that permit lapsed. What we're asking for now is so all along this owner has held this property, planning in some future point to be able to put that in. He just didn't put it in. Now he knows it has to be an IA. He sucked it up. There's no discussion whether there's conventional
no
versus
discussion,
IA.
right.
But would ask that he be able to put in, as he's planned on all of this time, based on a previous permit that was issued with the same regulations in place for a 4-bedroom system on the 27,000 square foot lot. And again, I think another thing that needs to be considered on this one is that you have such a large chunk of open space. Whether you have to get into, I think there's been enough discussions with everything else on nitrogen aggregation plans, but I don't know that in this particular, I'm pretty sure it's the last vacant lot in this subdivision.
There's one more.
One more, so there's two. Included the locus map. I included the old permit with the application materials. And so the owner feels that, of course, it would only be fair to have a system that he's been expecting all of this time because he's had that permit that was issued. And then it would be an IA system. So from your perspective, I won't go through the same thing, but the same discussion, the same exact basis applies, that you're going to have less nitrogen from a 4-bedroom IA than from a 2-bedroom conventional.
Of course, we could do as we've done before and say have 3 bedrooms.
We've done some negotiating.
We remember very often we have done that.
This is exactly what I was talking about before. Here we are, now we have a half-acre thing,
Yeah.
that's 2 bedrooms, and they want 4.
Well, this isn't any different
But-
than the Fisher's Landing thing. If
No.
you're going to talk about negotiation, it was basically, if you want to say the term manifestly unjust, you've just taken away that stuff just because he didn't put it. He could have put this 4-bedroom septic in and left it, and then you would have been. Here it is today. When he goes to pull a permit, we would have said, "Well, you got the 4 in there. You never use it. Now you got to switch it to an IA." I mean, because of the rules changed in 2015. So we gave the people half-acre lots left in Fisher's Landing, 4 bedrooms. It was the same thing. They could only really get 3 with an IA. So we gave them the 4 with the IA.
But
Or is it any
here it
different?
should be 2 and he wants 4.
Right,
But-
the rule changed in 2015 to say that it has to be an IA and you only get 2 bedrooms.
Right,
But
here,
we basically took that away from them just last year.
Yes, we did.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, as well, on this lot, this isn't a 20,000 square foot lot. It's a 27,000 square foot lot. And the implication there is that this also meets that same loading rate under the state approval of the essentially 6 per 660. So the math works out. So it's not quite the same as the Fisher's Landing where they were saying we want an extra bedroom. This is the same number of bedrooms that would be allowed per the Mass DEP approval letter. The math works out if you take 0.0165, which is the loading rate of 660 divided by 40,000 times the lot area of 27 and change, you come up with 448 or something gallons per day. So it's allowed under that. I think that when you got to consider the lot area. It's all based on not just the 2 and the 4. It's based on the actual lot area and the math related to the loading rate of 4 bedrooms per 40,000 conventional or 6 bedrooms per 40,000 with an IA.
Other comments?
the only other comment, I think if we wanted to do something here, which we may or may not, but I think the fact that it had a prior approval is something you can look to hang your hat on. So it's a little different in that sense. That's
Okay.
all.
Comments? I mean, what I mean,
Is this the part of the?
That's
the part of the project.
Open land, yeah.
I got you.
And then Moore's End's on this side.
The only thing I have is, everybody's gonna come in with an IA, and they're gonna want more bedrooms. Some of the people that we had, when their systems failed, and we made them put an IA in, we didn't give them extra bedrooms.
Right.
We said, you got a 4-bedroom system that failed, you put in an IA system for 4 bedrooms, and that's what they did. They could have said, I want 7.
that's why I would vote against this, or I would be a nice guy and say have 3 bedrooms instead of 4.
And
And that's my payment for the fact the permit was issued before. That's what I would do.
And it seems to me part of that was whether they were in the harbor watershed district where we require them.
Yeah.
And this is in the harbor watershed district?
That's correct.
Yes.
To be clear.
See, this is a little different.
So this is
these-
different from Hummock Pond.
These
because we have a
next,
different set
these
of
next two
regulations.
are in this watershed district.
Yeah.
Any other comment? Do I have a motion, or do you want to? I don't want to delay this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if I could ask, why don't we hold this for a month as well, and I'll discuss with the owner and
Fine.
come back.
Okay.
Tell the owner it might get done, but the board might be willing to look at 3 bedrooms. At least the chairman would.
Right. But you might have support.
I might have support. And you can go on to 106 Surfside, and you want 5 bedrooms there.
So again, now this is not either of the harbor watershed districts. This is the wellhead district. So now you're talking about, do we have a problem with, well, first off, it's not near either of the surface water bodies. It's got on-site wells. This is the property that was going to be the 40B on Surfside Road.
Yes.
And is now going to be just 2 residential lots. And so those properties, it's been subdivided so that it's 2 55,000 and change square foot lots. And then each of those would get an 8-bedroom system meeting that same loading criteria. Of that, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. It's it's the same environmental benefit that we've been through, and in terms of distances, you're talking about from a town water well, 3,900 feet in the state forest, 1.4 miles from Nantucket Harbor, 2.2 miles from Hummock Pond. And again, you'll have less nitrogen with a managed system. If you are most comfortable with putting this with the other one, versus a feeling that you need to deny it, then certainly we'll try to work on the same information. If you felt this is different because it's not in
Well, I
Hummock
would say
or
the same
Nantucket,
thing. I would be a nice guy and say instead of 5, 4, or something like that. I don't know what the rest of the board would say.
They can have 5 conventional.
Can have 5 conventional.
Yeah.
That's true.
then you won't get an IA system. You
I
won't
want
get
an IA.
nitrogen, you
I
won't
want
get-
an IA system.
I think this is also a little different in that it's not in the harbor watershed
Yeah, yeah,
district. And that's been a real line that we've
What is,
drawn.
Roberta, what is the difference whether it's the harbor shed or the wellhead?
This one's different mainly because we're not contaminating a surface water body. This water is more going into the aquifer that gets part of the town well. That water gets tested. It's whole 9 yards. We view it. This one is a little different mainly because the regulation is different mainly because we just strictly restricted it to the 1 per 10,000 for the protection of the wellhead. This one isn't protecting a surface water. There's no TMDL to be reached. There's
All right.
no nitrogen loading to be reached on surface waters. This one is a proactive, preventative measure. regulation rather than an environmental protection regulation that we did with the other ones.
So, it just seems to me that, again, let's take another example, and in those areas that aren't in the harbor watershed district, or if we do the same in Nantucket eventually, or Hummock Pond, my sense is they've been eligible for this kind of, I don't like to use the phrase bonus, but however you want to look at it, you
Yes.
get an extra bit for using
An IA system, which we definitely want to encourage.
Yeah, so I don't think I have a problem here.
Okay,
And
I agree.
I want to be comfortable with Roberto that we're not doing, I think we've been doing this all along, in
Yeah.
effect. Is that
Yes.
roughly this case?
In effect, yes.
Yeah, so, I don't,
I'm okay.
yeah, so,
I'm okay.
that makes sense to me. And we're going to have to deal with those areas which we haven't done a harbor watershed district like Nantucket and get at that issue, because those
Well.
are still open and need addressing.
What we really need to do on this island, so we can spend more time on other issues, is sewer this whole island. So we won't, I'm quite serious, so we won't have to deal with all these variances.
That's true.
Because they're all a little subtly different, and I'm always afraid about being consistent, and everyone has a good argument, and we just sewered everybody. I could be home for dinner, all right? And we would also have a cleaner island, but I'm not going there right now. So I think we can move on this one.
Yeah,
Do
so
I have a
I'd be
motion?
prepared to make a motion to grant that variance.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of a variance for 106 Surfside, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chairman says aye. Variance is approved.
Thank you for your time, and I'll work with the staff and see you at the next
So
meeting.
you got 1 out of 3.
Well, it's,
Well, the others are-
every site's different, so we'll work on it. I'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
And I hope you can make your boat.
Well, my daughter didn't make her boat here.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it? The variances?
There's 8 Pinkham Circle is the next one.
What's that?
8 Pinkham Circle. It's number 14.
14, yes.
So this one is asking for a bedroom credit, same concept.
Yes.
The difference here is that it is in one of the needs areas for sewer.
It's in a needs area.
So the sewer will be coming here. It is part of the Somerset needs area, not a plus or Shimo. So
So the sewer will be.
Somerset is the one that was just voted down.
Yes.
That Pinkham, that's in the Meadowview.
Yeah. So,
So this
that-
is Huzzy Farm
This is
Road.
a plus.
Yeah, it's a plus.
Yes, sorry, this is a plus.
This is a
My-
plus, this is
That's
Huzzy
good.
Farm
Sorry,
Road.
this is
Yeah.
because there was
Yeah.
Somerset on the area. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. This is going to get sewer.
Yes.
My apologies. This is slated
Is
to
going to
get
get
sewer.
sewered.
Yeah, so they're asking for the bedroom credit in the meantime, putting in an IA until the sewer gets here.
And they have, as we said before, 10 years.
No, they're asking for a bedroom credit.
Oh,
They're asking for a bedroom
right.
credit.
You're right.
They're-
I'm sorry.
Which if they
So-
waited to build on the sewer, they could have the bedrooms anyway.
Yeah, we could stipulate.
Yeah,
As
we'll
soon
have-
as the sewer comes, you're off the septic tank.
Yeah, this is the same concept as 34 Brewster
Yes,
that we
yes,
just
yes,
approved.
yes, yes.
So we can give them the bedroom credit as long as they are required to connect to
The
sewer,
sewer as soon as it's there.
it's available.
That's my question. All these people that are in the sewer district, that are putting in IAs and everything, when we give them permission to do that, is there a right in writing that says
That's what we've been
sewer is
doing.
by their doorway?
What
That's
I've been requiring is in the attorney's letter that they've been writing is that they provide us with a letter signed by them and us that says when the sewer is available, they have to pull their permit within 60 days, I believe it is, and then they have to have everything ready.
But in this case, if we give him an IA system, he's going to have 10 years.
No.
No, because
I
this
think
is a bedroom.
he's agreeing to
He's agreeing when the
operate
sewer goes.
outside
Okay,
that
fine. All right.
blanket.
As soon as the sewer's there.
As soon as the
Yeah.
sewer's
Oh,
there.
so he is, I have my notes wrong here. I said he's not getting sewered. He is getting sewered.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
And that
I
agreement
mistook my.
supersedes or has a higher level of authority on the guy than the grant of the variance
Than the
we
blanket
just
variance.
amended the minutes about.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
gotcha. Okay.
So
Any
that seems
any
to make it
discussion?
okay.
Yeah.
questions?
Nope.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
with the caveats
That
of
they
the
can make
letter
decision.
having to connect the sewer.
Sorry, you're right.
Do we hear
Artel has,
Without that 10-year
Yes.
granting,
it doesn't occur here.
Right, we're asking for a specific agreement that supersedes that
The
variance
10-year agreement.
request. And maybe you want to go to council to make sure it says that
Mhm.
in the proper way. And then you have a form in case it comes up again, so.
that's also.
But I would second the motion.
All right, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the variance for a Pinkham Circle?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
Chairman says aye. That's granted, but please make sure that all the paperwork reflects all the little caveats that
I
we
think-
said about that.
Right, I
Yes.
think when you get that paperwork, would you just circulate it to the board?
Yes,
So we
will
can
do.
see the language that
Yes.
Yes,
the
sir.
client agrees to, or the customer? Whatever.
Okay. Excuse me. Now, Roberta wanted to talk about what do we do now that we're not having sewers in Nantucket, at least
At least for the moment.
for the moment. Because
Yes.
that, will- as you know, we've been dancing a little bit, waiting or not waiting for sewers.
Yes. So there was no decision by the Board of Selectmen yesterday to put it on or take it off of the annual town meeting yet. I think it's being brought up at next week's meeting, Rick.
Well, it'll have to be, to get on, it's going to have to go on before we close the warrant.
Yes.
But it'll come up, I think, if not for a decision next week, shortly thereafter.
It was, yes.
It'll be the first week in January. I think everybody knows we got to make up our minds.
Exactly. So
And, excuse me,
the
one other thing, and the staff, with the chairman, Mr. Kelly, was talking to the town manager, and the town manager said the staff, whoever that all encompasses,
Mhm.
are discussing options or what they might want to do and what recommendations they may or may not make. So
Yes.
that was the sort of background.
Yes, so I am on that group. I did meet with the town manager to discuss options for if sewer is not put on the agenda for 10 town meeting. The first step of that option would have to be to release the ACOs. All the ACOs in the Somerset and Nantucket district actually expire in January if there is no progress towards sewer. Putting it on the agenda is considered progress towards sewer.
How many ACOs?
We're looking at about 60 or so, I think. Yeah, I think it's close. It's
It's a fair number.
it's a fair number. Yes, some of them are so recent that the monies haven't been collected, so it's just a matter of canceling out the ACO. Some of them are a few years old, so now they have some money that we're going to have to return. All of these have been put into a dedicated account, so there's nothing that we're not losing money in this. So that would be step one. Step two is looking into setting up more strict regulations for Nantucket IA system, something that would mirror the Nantucket Harbor watershed.
Right, that would make sense.
So,
But if we do that, let me just go back. If it doesn't come up for another vote, then it's going to be forever before this happens.
exactly.
Even if it comes up for another vote, when would the actual ballot question be?
At the next available voting time,
Which
so
would be November again?
which
So it's almost another year.
for town meeting, I believe there's a ballot vote immediately after because of local election.
Okay, so it won't be, I just don't want to get in another situation where we start
Yeah.
treading water and we say, well, it's not going to happen, so we're not going to enforce this, and we'll be
Yeah.
a little nice, and we'll do ACOs.
Exactly.
And it gets to be this continuing treadmill.
Yeah, we
So
have,
it would be relatively quickly.
yes, we have a local election immediately after for the selectmen votes.
Okay.
I believe we are allowed to put, because this is a local home rule vote, not necessarily home rule in the legal term, we could put it on that ballot. So we would know for sure at that point whether the sewer is going to be putting in. But in the assumption that it's not, I would say we need to move forward.
Yeah, I do
on
too. So
regulations.
if we're going to do regulations, we should slit for February then, yes.
We can schedule something for February.
Yeah, we have to advertise and all that stuff.
Yes,
That's
because
what
we
I
have to
mean.
do the 3 weeks of advertising. I would suggest that we do set up a
Open
public
hearing
hearing
for February.
for February. There is a couple regulations that I would like to at least touch base first before we schedule the hearing, so that we can either schedule them all together or a staggered time. The first regulation would be the IA requirement, where we would mirror the Nantucket Harbor watershed, where there would be an IA component to be installed at any new construction, failure, upgrade, or renovation,
Or transfer.
or transfer. Or
Sa-
transfer.
Essentially the same regulation.
Identical. The only difference that I would suggest is that we set a deadline. That 5 years from now, every system has to be an IA. So that we don't get into a situation with like Nantucket Harbor watershed where somebody can live in that house for the next 20 years on a conventional system as long as it
And how
doesn't
many
fail.
systems are now failed in Nantucket?
Last time we checked, which was about 2 months ago, we had 89 technical failures, I believe, and it was about 20 or so.
I think the number was 111.
Yeah, it was 111 in total.
And they would all have to be IAs.
They would all have to be IAs.
Does Nantucket residents realize the cost they're about to incur?
We did our best to provide that information to Nantucket residents. Whether they chose to believe it or not is not up to us.
Okay, I just want to make,
Those numbers are a little off.
it's going to be numbers.
Yes. What it comes down to is something that was brought up to our attention on Monday by the Natural Resources Coordinator is that if you are located in one of the FEMA flood maps, you're actually not allowed to fill. It is illegal to fill that area, which means for those who don't meet groundwater separation, they can't mound their system without having to do a complete mitigation of that same amount of cubic area, which essentially means if you put in a 10,000 cubic foot mound, you also need to install a 10,000 cubic foot tank with infiltration on the same property to account
Would there
for
be
that
space
flood.
for that?
That's the problem. There's most likely no space.
So what would these people do?
That is an engineering and Concom question.
Right.
Because what it comes down to is it is a Conservation Commission issue. It is just something that was brought up to our attention.
And how many properties would that be?
Basically every property on Tennessee Ave.
Wow.
So it sounds though like that isn't something that's
Well,
new. It's been out there forever, and whether it's been
There
enforced
isn't-
or not is something else.
It's a different story. Yeah.
right now, there's, off the top of my head, at least 12 or 15 IAs along Tennessee Ave. which
Yes. Should have had
you
that
show me
enforcement.
where the mound is.
Yeah, where they
There
should have
isn't
had that
any- There
enforcement.
isn't any mounds that
Mm.
people that are so unobtrusive. That's the first thing that you see when you're driving down the road.
Oh,
You'd be surprised. of
aesthetics
groundwater.
wise, yeah, aesthetics
all right.
wise, I'm not
So
worried.
there's issues to
There's
deal.
options too. We
Yeah.
could, anybody who doesn't have the IA in already, maybe we make the rest of the people on Tennessee
Mhm.
Ave tight tanks. We can do it.
So I think those are the kinds of options we have to go through, but no matter what, my sense is I guess we have to start with how do we deal with the ACOs specifically, what piece of papers
Yes.
have to flow back and forth, and to schedule the public hearings.
Mhm. So,
Steve, what's the difference in price off the top of your head between an IA system and a tight tank?
Oh, probably
Half? A tight tank?
not quite half. You know, my basic.
But then you gotta add in, it's gonna be pumped every,
Well, depending on the size of it, and then it actually becomes part of the sewer system. They got to pay the privilege fee, all that. Pretty sure.
when they connect to
But I mean, physical part is probably maybe close to half. If a IA cost you 40, maybe the tight tank, putting it in, maybe where it is, and you had to de-water, get it
Yeah.
in, 20.
So we could give people, they could have a choice, put an IA system in or a tight tank?
Well, the tight tank could only be if, quote, no other options are available by the state law. So,
Well, they've dumped that onto the town. I mean, they've given us that authority with only.
yeah.
They have, but just because we have the authority to accept tight tanks doesn't mean that we should enforce tight tanks.
Yeah, well, there are a lot
There-
of questions.
Well,
So,
yeah.
All right, so-
right, there's circumstances where it may warrant it. And-
Yes.
And if you don't want any nutrient loading in places like we did on the other side of the bridge, then
Right.
things
Yes.
warrant it.
That was,
Yes.
there's really no options on the other side of the bridge.
Yes. The other regulations that are being, the other regulatory ideas that are being thrown out are a mandatory water connection, that if you have access to town water, to connect to town water, just like the mandatory sewer connection that we have.
and we could the Board of Health establish such a regulation?
Yes, we
can.
could.
We should.
Yes. And
Because as
To use
Roberta
these-
reminded me that once that it's not just all the nitrogen in the harbors, there's water quality issues.
exactly. There's the questions behind a lot of this is some part of the argument that got lost in the, losing the trees in the forest is per se, is there's also a major public health component to putting in the sewers. So if we do a mandatory connection to town water, you're changing the general hydrogeologic flow in that aquifer there. So you're not drawing out water as well as putting in water through your septic systems. Now the water that a typical person would be drawing out of that aquifer is essentially null. We're bringing in water from town, so the only thing that's going into the aquifer is the water recharge from the septic systems, other than rain and runoff, but that's a
So
different conversation.
That's a plus.
It's a plus because of the dilution factor and flow factor. And then a third regulation that is also being thrown around the table is a mandatory well water testing. So people, for example, across Massasoit Bridge, people who are not going to have the water access when town water gets all the way down there, if they're going to be required to have a well, we should have them test their potable water wells once every 2 years, just to make sure there's no crossing of the maximum contamination level. The Safe Drinking Water Act set the MCLs, and technically the state housing code requires a acceptable potable water standard. We have had some discussions in the office. We're supposed to be getting the water well reports every time that a lab test has been happening, but for some reason Barnstable County has not been sending those to us. So we're going to be connecting with Barnstable County so that we can have them. So far, there's only been 1 or 2 wells that have had to been re-drilled or replaced just because of water contaminate levels. Generally, they're accepted as just something so that we can have that on file. The question that the staff has been kind of throwing around is, what are we going to do with that data? We're going to be collecting the data, but what are we going to do with it? Other than when we
from the well testing data?
Yes. It's just a question of tracking on our end. If we get that data, yes, we can definitely track plumes, we can track failure reports, we can track saltwater levels, we can track all of this. But do we really have the time
And then
and the staff right
you
now
have
to
to
do
establish an area too.
Exactly.
You know,
So that's just one of the things that we have in floating out there that has to be fleshed out a little bit. And then the last regulation that's being thrown around the table is a pool regulation. Selectman Fee is really concerned about the pool drainage. Some people are draining straight over their lawn. Some people are draining into the stormwater system. Some people are even draining straight into their septic system. It's a big no-no, but it happens. So one of the questions would be is to make sure that the water is being dechlorinated properly, that the pool is being taken care of properly before the drainage happens. Because that water, even if it is, especially if you throw it straight into the storm drain, it goes into the harbor. If it goes over your grass, surface discharge, if it's properly dechlorinated, the grass and that A layer in the soil will help denitrify and take some of the suspended solids. It'll filter it before it gets to the aquifer, which dropping it into the stormwater system does not do.
Right.
So it's just a general idea of how to regulate this idea. The same issue is enforcement. It's the same problem we're running
Like
into with
fertilizers.
fertilizer, where you have to catch them doing it. We can require a pool drainage permit, but
Something else for you to deal with.
it's exact same issue. We're running into the manpower issue.
But on the other hand, that isn't always a reason not to do something.
Exactly.
60% of the people comply because they're good Boy Scouts. Or
Yeah, so
whatever,
it's the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule. Yeah.
So you would have for us draft regulations in February?
I can get draft regulations.
Or would we
for you.
just...
I can
Because
definitely
I
get...
suspect this hearing would be a couple sessions.
Oh, yes, we're going to have a lot of
Because I'm
people
sure there
here.
would be a lot of
Interested parties.
interested parties.
Yes. I can definitely have the IA regulation drafted by then. It's more than anything a copy and paste job from the
Yeah.
regulation and that Nantucket Harbor watershed.
That's the important one to get started with.
Yes.
Right away.
And water connection, I can definitely have that ready
Could I
because
just
it's
ask a
identical
question
to the
on water
sewer
connection?
connection.
Because the pipes don't run everywhere there.
Yes,
So,
they don't run
You
everywhere.
can go to the map and
See.
write a GIS and you see it. So has the water company been involved in your staff discussions?
That's the next
Are they
step.
going to run pipe or not?
That's the next step. We need to talk to the water company right now before this regulation would be brought
Because,
forward.
there's a lot of scuttlebutt out there about why they didn't run pipe in some places. which
Yes.
is Whatever.
Mhm.
Well, so at least at the, we can talk about it, but we'll try to target IA public hearing in Mattocket for February.
Okay.
And the other stuff,
We'll
we'll talk.
discuss. Sounds good. But in general, we are working on a way to look at the alternatives here. There is a lot of arguments regarding the landfill. I did speak with a resident over by town yesterday, and he has a general idea of a possible way to work on the landfill, some sort of a gasification plant.
That's been discussed.
That has been discussed, but there's apparently a new technology, much cheaper, and we already have the infrastructure in place here that he mentioned to me that I still have to research. It was just yesterday that I looked at, but it's something worth talking about. And then we've already discussed, I believe, at the selectmen yesterday, at the budget presentation, some of the testing for Long Pond and looking into Mattocket Ditch. That is also one of the steps that's going to
And
be
even
taken.
opening the pond.
And even
was
opening the
mentioned
pond was
yesterday,
discussed.
Just to be clear.
Yes, it was.
So,
Okay.
So,
Any questions about
just
Mattocket strategies?
Just one more question, because I think assuming all this goes forward and people start putting in their systems and so on, and let's say sewer shows up in 3 years. I mean, it wasn't going to get installed for 5 years anyway, at the best. So that wouldn't be very much delayed, actually. The blanket variance we passed would still apply.
Yes.
in that case,
Just
yes.
to get
And we might, and as I said, we might want to adjust it a year or two,
Yeah.
depending on when the sewer comes. And it'd be very important for all these people who are going to have to put IA systems that they understand there is that
Right.
10-year variance.
Yes.
It will help ease a little bit. Yeah, we can just take two questions, that's it, then we'll move on.
Just a comment.
We'll take 2 comments, short ones, and then move on.
Great, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. As it relates to the Mattocket Harbor watershed and the future discussions on IA systems, I think it would be very helpful to bring, whether you want to or not, Brian Howes into the conversation. The TMDLs are essentially based upon our water quality data and the models that they put out. And I would be very interested in seeing if there was an existing, they said there was, or a new run of the models with the data we have now in terms of the last water quality from the last 8 years since the TMDL was created, to look at if we did every house in the Nantucket Harbor watershed to an IA system based upon these 50 to 60% reduction rates, would we get to our TMDL for Hither Creek? Not Long Pond. That's a different
It would be nice
question.
doing that. I would
Because
speculate.
if we don't have that data, or if that, I think we might get lost in February and March with the discussion. I think you might need that data. And unfortunately, it might come out against us to say that you're going to put in all these TMDLs, you're actually going to need sewer. Or it's going to come out the other way with some of the newer data information on the improved IA systems, that it might come out in a certain way. It's just whether you like the models or not, that's the regulatory framework we're working with.
Miles
so,
and miles. Sometimes they're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, like I said before, the simple thing to do is sewer the whole island. But and we don't have to deal with all this.
I guess where I'm going is that if the models say that that even doing IA systems isn't going to work, DEP isn't going to accept that. They're going to
Right,
say sewer.
and when I can even argue
yeah.
the minimum nitrogen thresholds are probably calculated too high, because if you look at it to a true natural level of nitrogen,
Yeah.
but that's for another discussion.
And then secondly, just through you, Chairman, to Roberto, when the pond, opening the pond was brought into the conversation for Long Pond, ever since it not breached, but it got overwatched about 3 years ago, all that vegetation is gone now, and it's basically a sand right from the bottom of Long Pond to the beach. So it's a little bit more practical now to open it up. We did a very long study with Brian Howes and UMass on Hummock Pond, basically utilizing all their data, proving that if it was opened up right, we could hit our TMDLs eventually for Hummock Pond. So I'd like to sort of explore that as well, because it's definitely a potential viable option.
Okay.
Also with some of the dredging that has been considered as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Richard, and you get the last word, and then we're going to hear.
I would certainly support Cormac's recommendations, but the question has always been, in my mind, with regard to the sludge. I mean, it's been a topic that's been tossed out there.
What
certainly.
sludge?
The sludge that's being put on the land out at the landfill. The sludge that's being used from the wastewater treatment plant, that's being used as a cover material. Perhaps we could goad or convince somebody at the DPW level to please get the Board of Health a report on the nutrient loading of that sludge as it comes out prior to its application as a cover material. I think it's an important number that's missing in this entire discussion.
I actually want to look at that, because in this whole all this debate going up to the sewer vote, I've had multiple opinions and comments about there is sludge, there's not sludge. The
I
sludge
agree,
is,
and I think if we
the
get a
sludge
number
is
on this,
treated, and I need myself to.
the scientific data needs to be that number, and that number
Well,
needs to be. We need to know what the nutrient loading of that element to the
Right.
cover material is.
Well, I've heard everybody say it's there and not there. One more question, and then we'll hear Roberto's report.
Our treatment plant superintendent is here. He could answer that question for you.
That's all right. Very quick.
Well, then you don't want me to come up because I intend to speak. David Gray, I am your sewer director. I run the wastewater plants. We don't take sludge to the landfill. It is not sludge. It is, we call it cake. And anyone wants to come out at any point in time, I'll show you the cake that we have. I have tested it. I have results from the tests. It's just a matter of giving them to Roberto or whoever. I do have the test for about 2 months ago I took samples. So it's,
Well, if you'd given them to Roberto and he could send them to the board, I think it'd be very helpful.
that's fine. No, and
It'd be helpful for me, because
Yeah.
I'm very confused, whether it's sludge or
And
cake.
when
or-
we go out to the landfill, we dump our cake into the tipping floor, which has a drainage system that goes to the leachate tanks. We then haul the leachate back to the facility and treat it again.
Yeah.
After the tipping floor, it goes into the air floor, and it goes into all the months, 2 months, whatever like that, when it's in there doing all the air rows and the composting. So, and that floor also has a drainage system that goes to a tank that we pump out and we treat back at the plant. So we don't dump it on the ground out there. We dump it on contained floors. So
That's why Thank you.
All right.
If you have that data, it'd be great. I'd love
I
to see
do.
it.
And like I said, if anyone wants to come out and see, we'll show you the process. So.
I'd love to. I may do that.
It's
Then I can
actually-
speak better about it when I'm trying to debate people about it.
It's actually a really cool tour.
Okay.
I've taken the tour of that.
All right, so enough on this. We have a lot of work to do in regards to Nantucket.
Yes. So I'll go ahead and start working on
Yes.
a regulation for February.
Yes.
So I'll schedule the hearing.
And
I'll
by then
start-
we'll know if it's on the books or not for
Yes.
the town meeting.
Yes.
Roberto, have you had any feedback from the people in Nantucket, one way or another, after this thing didn't pass?
The general consensus that I've heard so far is twofold. One, there's not enough information on the landfill, the cake conversation, the contamination into Long Pond, that the alternatives were not explored. The other side of the conversation that I've also been hearing as to why it's failed is the cost. $80 million was not palatable after we just did a $45 million vote for Shimo. Generally, that's really what we heard. It was on a ballot. We shared a ballot. The $80 million for the sewer, $3 million for a line to sell, and I don't remember how much more $1 million for an overage,
An overage
on the
is a
school.
3 million.
Yeah. So it's the general consensus that I heard on that argument is we're asking for $80 million on a project that most likely we're going to come back and ask for another 20 on because of overages. It's just the cost wasn't palatable. And that's why a lot of people voted against it. I don't necessarily agree with that assessment, but the voters have spoken.
Voters have spoken.
So
And we will react accordingly.
exactly.
Your report, sir.
Yes, just a real quick. For anyone watching or anything like that, we're expecting extreme amounts of weather today and tomorrow. Temperatures are going to get really low. Please do not let your animals outside. If you have boarding capabilities for any of these outdoor animals like horses, make sure you keep them warm. Don't go outside without proper coverage. It is just these temperatures and winds. The wind chill is expected to be into the negative degree temperatures today, tomorrow, and maybe even into Saturday. So just please take proper precautions as far as the weather goes. And then the second and last one, I'm only trying to keep it to 2 today, is there's been some conversations about herbicide use on the island and how it affects water quality both in the aquifer as well as in the harbors. It is definitely a long conversation that deserves its own
And pesticides and
pesticides as well. That deserves its own agenda item. It wasn't put on today's agenda because, as you see, it's already almost 5:30, and that could be another hour-long conversation. So that is something that I'm looking to research, get some information as far as our aquifer goes from the water company, so that I can have some hard data and hard discussions for everyone at the January meeting. And I'll
Like
go ahead and put
we always
that
say,
there.
we want to really make sure what the issue is before we go off crazy.
Exactly.
And I talked to Roberto about perhaps having a symposium,
Mm-hmm.
bring in some experts and talk about it.
And that's it. Those were the only 2 things I want to put on the
Yeah.
report today.
So for those concerned about herbicides and pesticides, it is on our radar screen, and we will be working on that, or at least getting information on it and real data, not just it's horrible. I mean, it is horrible, but let's get a sense of what the real issue is with it.
Yes.
Anything else? Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. I want to report that we have just been established as a warming center at St. Paul's Church. Dave Franzuto and I.
Can you come down to the microphone so that people hear you listening?
Sir. Curtis Barnes. I want to report to you that St. Paul's Church has just been approved and established as a warming center in view of the weather conditions coming forward. Dave Franzuto and I have been in touch. He has my cell phone, and if they need the center to be opened, it will be open within 5 minutes of getting his call.
Thank you, sir.
That's
Excellent.
appropriate in the context of Roberto's report.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm pleased to say that the state has approved St. Paul's as a warming center.
Very good, St. Paul's. All right, gentlemen, anything else? So next time you're going to give us a little mathematical
Yes, I have.
nitrogen calculations?
Yeah, I have it written down to set up some logic models and some.
I don't.
calculations.
I know you have nothing to do, but
Yeah,
but
they
I'd
spend-
like that as soon as possible because when I see that stuff, I really have to look at in
Oh,
detail.
We're government workers. We sit around and eat bonbons all day and get
Okay.
overpaid.
And then-
And next meeting will also be scheduled about an hour earlier for
Ah,
Dr.
yes.
Esveld's
the next
conversation.
meeting will start at 3:00, and Dr. Elsbeth
Esveld.
Ellsfeld will make a presentation about his project and where the status of it. He would very much like as many Nantucketers as possible. He would like the Board of Selectmen there. He really wants to make sure that people have bought into this or at least understand what he's doing. So we figured we'd have him speak from 3 to 4, and then we will at 4 go into variances and other exciting items.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no objections, the meeting is adjourned.